Disclaimer, disclaimer, disclaimer. We live in the present day, which by all historical accountings is the most modern, futuristic, technologically advanced, scientifically savvy day ever to dawn on civilization. We also have the best smartphones ever. And how have we gotten here? Through many yesterdays of dedicated scientists, letting their curiosity lead them beyond what was known already and into the unknown frontier. By relying on nothing but the evidence produced in experimentation to light their way, to serve as proof of reality, these early pioneers of the present day took bold steps into the unknown and collectively returned with the modern age. While most of the bounty of science has been embraced with open arms, it's the oddest collection of things being held at arm's length. Evolution, stem cells, global warming. And while the dumbfounding deniers, the detrimental detractors, and the dodgy deteriorators of discussion can use every modern device to spread their message of misinformation, taking full advantage of the scientific bounty by way of satellites, radio, television, and the internet, there is one thing that they do not make use of to make their points. They do not use science. They no doubt use cell phones, use plastics, have taken medicine, and use electric lights at night. But they do not use science to support their arguments, because that science does not exist. What does exist is on This Week in Science, coming up next.
I've got the kind of mind that can't get enough. I want to learn everything. I want to fill it all up with new discoveries that happen every day of the week. There's only one place to go to find the knowledge I seek. I want to know what's happening. What's happening? What's happening this week in science? What's happening? What's happening? What's happening this week in science?
Good science to you, Kirsten.
Good science to you too, Justin. How are things over there in good old Davis, California?
Awesome. It's been fantastic weather this winter.
I know. It's a good winter. Although in a lot of places, there is some really extreme weather happening this year.
Oh, yeah. Europe's getting pounded with a lot of snowfall.
Yeah. A lot of cold places that aren't normally as cold as they are. A lot of people who are having a lot of trouble as a result of some extreme weather events. Mm-hmm. Yeah, some other places get it a little
not so much.
Like Davis. Yeah. Or San Francisco. It's nice. It's a nice winter here. We'll take it where we can get it. Everybody out there, you are listening to This Week in Science. And as usual, we've got science news on a whole hour of it tonight. No interviews, none of that. We're just talking about science stories that happened during the last week. And it's me, Justin, and Blair. We're going to be bringing you the science.
Blair.
Heyo. Heyo. All right. So what did I bring today? I brought stories about hitting a lake, an addiction, disease of the brain, and some corals. What did you bring, Justin?
I've got a big collection here. I don't know what else is going to make it on the air today. There is a very important story this week in the end of Ice Caps, which is going to be combined. I'm going to start a new shtick on the show for a little while. Debunking global warming debunkers. Bringing up some of the...
Debunkers. Okay.
Debunking the debunkers, bring up some of the popular arguments and giving the reasons why that's either a good argument or a bad argument. New improved solar cells, too. Pretty neat advancement in solar cell technology. And then there's a couple about thinking and hearing, and one very last minute one, if we get to it.
All right. I like last minute stories if we can get to them. So we'll see what we can do. Blair, what did you bring?
I brought a story about zebras and why they have stripes. It might not be why we think.
It's because I wore a black and white striped shirt.
It's true.
Yeah. No.
You also have striped socks on.
I coordinated. I did.
Yeah.
I like coordinating my socks with my outfits if I can, if at all possible. Little insight into my brain there that you probably didn't need to know. So why don't we jump into science news? This week in Lake Vostok. Lake Vostok, if you are not familiar with it, we've been reporting on it for a few years. It is a giant lake, like the world's biggest lake, that is found deep beneath the ice caps on the continent of Antarctica, and it was found. It was found within the last 50 years. The Russians built a southern research station there in 1957, Vostok Station, and they've been there ever since. And this is the furthest from the Southern Ocean. This is the so-called pole of cold or pole of inaccessibility where they're located. So it's not really an easy place to get to. Getting this from the Night Science Journalism Tracker. And this gigantic lake it's above the surface of the continent, but below 13,000 feet of ice, 4,000 kilometers of ice. This lake has been hiding for nearly 20 million years. It's been completely isolated, encapsulated in ice for 20 million years. And so there are huge questions as to what might be preserved or even still existing. Maybe they're extremophiles who are alive within the lake environment. It's liquid water, so it's probably fairly briny. So it very well may continue to harbor life. But we don't know, and we don't know who's there. So the Russians have been drilling, and they've been drilling and drilling and drilling. They can only drill during the Antarctic summer, which is only a very short season in which to drill. And that season is a very difficult season, and they can't continuously drill for the 3 months of the season. There's a lot of on and off and on and off, and drill bits break, and there are a lot of problems. So it's been years that they've been trying to reach this lake, and they just this week reported that they broke through, that they have drilled all the way into the lake. They've hit it, and
as soon as they made contact, it froze up completely. Like, have you ever seen like the water? That's and now it's just another block of ice. No, I don't know what's happened yet.
Right. No, so we don't have any results. Of course, there's no news coming back from any data analysis or anything, because they've only just reached the liquid water lake. So there is a whole lot of work that still needs to happen, and they are rushing, these Russian scientists, to complete specimen collections to try and cap what they've done by the end of the summer season, so that they don't. They're almost out of time. The end of the summer is coming soon, and that is going to be. It's a difficult, dangerous time to be able to get work done, especially if you're in an area that is known as the pole of inaccessibility. You want to get out of there before the inclement weather really starts to hit, and as long as you have as much light as possible. So the questions now are, what are we going to find? How soon are we going to start getting information out of this research? A press release that went out through the Russians, through RIA Novosti, the first release that came out, it aligned the science with a really odd tale of how a World War II German submarine somehow drove into the lake and hid Hitler's secret files and his and Eva Braun's remains for cloning. So, what do you take seriously? What do you take seriously if they're going to tell you that they hid Eva Braun and Hitler and for cloning, and there's a submarine at the bottom of this lake, and at the same time they say, "Oh yeah, we reached the lake." what is verified? So hopefully they actually did reach it and they're not just spinning a complete tale. But it seems to have been repeated by several reputable outlets that have since gotten rid of the German submarine story angle. So
it's a big cover up, right?
Yeah. So Wired has printed a story that doesn't talk at all about the submarine and just says that they have penetrated the lake. So we will see where this story goes. But we are excited. Antarctic exploration is happening. And there's a big...
And they beat the British, too, because the British are also drilling down trying to get to that same lake. There's a big debate, though, a big argument going on within the scientific community and even outside of the scientific community about, okay, so there's this isolated environment and, hey, look, we just infected it with whatever. Oh, that's what we do. Stuff. That's what we do, Kirsten. But the trolling part of that also might be because they have used a lot of petrochemicals to sort of grease their way down.
Yeah.
And that's been now introduced down there. And is that going to contaminate the samples that they're getting out, or if they ruin this person? Yeah. What if like this was the building blocks for life that was going to take over the planet, like 500 million years from now, and we just wiped it out by doing some drilling. You can't think like that. You've got to explore.
It was the planet's little safety.
It was like the backup life forms.
Yeah, backup. Oops. Sorry, planet.
Guess it's all on us now on this planet.
What else do you have there?
Okay, so this is let me find where did everything go? Am I in the wrong?
Oh, you've lost everything.
No. Yeah, because everything, we had to do a reboot before the show. So now all of my stories are disappearing. But here's one that has to do with ice, if I can.
I like ice. It goes right along with the theme of Antarctica.
Yeah, here we go. So this is a study that's going to be very interesting because you're going to hear elements of this study being repeated by global warming deniers. People who are, claiming that global warming is this big get-rich-quick scheme by scientists. This is the first really comprehensive satellite study that has been done of ice volumes on the surface of the Earth. This was done by NASA. They used the GRACE satellites, which are Gravity Recovery and Climate Experiment is how they get GRACE. But it's these two satellites that they do a lot of gravity strength experiments as well. And they are paired out there, and they're measuring each other's distance to figure out how much gravity is pulling on them at any given time over the Earth. But they've also been able to measure ice loss and all the land ice between 2003 2010, which is it's one of the largest satellite studies we've ever had on this subject, the largest. What they found was pretty astounding. The total global ice mass lost in the period of 2003 to 2010 when they were doing this, and this is from Greenland, Antarctica, and glaciers and ice caps, was about 4.3 trillion tons, or 1,000 cubic miles, or enough to cover the United States in 1.5 feet or half a meter of ice, or a 600-ton ice cube for every man, woman, and child on the planet. That's how much ice we have lost in this 7-year period of the study. This is enough ice to raise the height of the oceans by 0.5 inch. It says here, the Earth is losing a huge amount of ice to the ocean annually, and these new results will help us answer important questions in terms of both sea rise and how the planet's cold regions are responding to global change. That's from University of Colorado Boulder physics professor John Warr, who was working on this study. One of the lead researchers. This is the part that you're going to hear, though. They they noticed that some of the ice loss from the Asian glaciers and Asian mountains were a lot less than had been expected. There were, well, let's see if we can find it here. Yeah, this is the part you're going to hear from the global warming deniers. Some of the mountaintops in the Himalayas, the ice caps in the Himalayas, were estimated to be losing as much as 50 billion tons a year of ice. Through what they were doing, though, is they're not going up to the tops and measuring the entire ice cap. They're basically extrapolating from ice lost at glaciers close to the ground, what is going on throughout the whole system. What they discovered, though, is those high altitudes, of course, much colder temperatures. It's going to require quite a bit more climate change to actually affect and melt off those glaciers at the high summits. The actual report's coming back 4 billion tons of ice annually. So that's quite a disparate number. But we're talking in the billions here when the overall amount of loss that they've recorded here is 4.3 trillion tons. So this story is quite an alarming, really, evidence for what we've been talking about and what we sort of known has been going on for some time within the global warming.
Yeah. A half an inch to global sea level.
Half an inch sea rise.
Yeah.
In 7 years. And the other thing to keep in mind is this 7-year period really reflects the carbon we were putting out and would have been 1960s, right? In fact, it would have to go back even further. It would be early 50s, right? Early 50s to like 53 to 1960. That's the carbon that's really out in the atmosphere affecting it, because the ocean's sink can store and sequester carbons for a 50-year cycle. Then it goes out and is adding to what's being put out now. So we're really at a stage now where we're working with the impact we've made to the greenhouse gases about 50 years ago. So we still have to follow that trend forward to where we are today and what we're contributing now. So it's very interesting. And, you know, we've already got it in the chat room here, too, which is amazing. Global warming could have happened anyway. It's just another cycle. It's nature. It's just, the idea that this is somehow just a normal cycle is an argument that's...
It's a fair starting point if we were talking about stuff 30 years ago, 50 years ago, when we were just starting to really analyze the data, when we didn't really have a lot of satellite data, when we didn't really have as many ice cores going back hundreds of thousands of years, when we didn't really have as much information, when the models were not as complete as they are now. Not saying that they are complete, but they're much better than they used to be. Sure, the Earth goes through natural warming and cooling cycles. Absolutely. But this particular cycle, what we're seeing is not the likelihood of it being attributed to only non-human causes is very slim.
Right. And so the argument, though, it sounds like a sound argument in the beginning. You know, just because temperatures are going up doesn't mean it's man-made, doesn't mean it's this global warming thing. It's correct if you assume that the scientists have just made a correlative connection between temperatures rising and the idea of global warming, that humans are doing this. But the global warming, the idea that the greenhouse gases could be affected to change temperature was first really proposed in 1896. And then was really given some, another really strong look in the late 30s. And in the late 30s, I don't have it in front of me now, for G.S. Callender, I think is the guy's name. He was wondering if we were already affecting the climate. And the idea was it would take so much carbons, and we didn't really understand the whole system completely at that point. But it looked like if you kept adding additional greenhouse gases, you could actually be affecting temperature. This idea kind of goes away through 2 world wars, right? Because people are pretty distracted. We come back to it in the 50s, and we start looking at is there an impact? Has there been a change to the climate? We know now that the carbon levels are higher than they have before. And it should be, based on our models of the atmosphere, it should be raising the global temperature. Then 50 years of data collection, now satellites, ice cores, going back into fossil records, looking at the amount of carbons that were in the atmosphere based on what's found in calcium and seashells compared to what the climate was over millions of years. We have a very clear picture of the connection between carbons and climate change. And we also know how rapidly those things have happened in the past. So this wasn't a correlative idea where weathermen were like, hey, do you notice it's getting hotter? Maybe it's global warming. We should study that. No, it was the other way around. They understood how the atmosphere worked. They understood how that system worked first, and then went out into the field to see if there is the effect that they thought might be happening. And lo and behold, it is there. So the temperature thing alone is one confirmation of what's been suspected. It is, it's the facts that are backing up the hypothesis. So it's the proof of concept is being shown to us over and over again. It still boggles me that there's people who who just out of hand will say, nah, it's just the way the planet is, without having studied the planet. Because those who've studied how the planet is, who've studied the natural cycles, who've actually gone and looked at how the Earth and the atmosphere behave, are saying that this is a man-made trend and that we're rapidly heading to a warming period more quickly than we have in the past.
Yeah, one of the pieces of evidence that has always struck me as the most important or most convincing and not really talked about is the fact that we can actually look at where the carbon comes from based on the isotope that you're dealing with. So whether it's carbon 13, carbon 14, carbon 12, the isotope of the carbon is a signature, so to speak, of the source of that carbon. So whether or not it came from a plant source, biomass, or whether it came from a fossil source, changes the ratio of the isotopes. And so you can actually pinpoint, like you mentioned, Justin, if you look at calcium carbonates, you can actually see a shift in the type of isotopes and the ratio of the isotopes and how they were being taken up by organisms. And it correlates very well with the last 100 years of human industrial fossil fuel use. So that's one of the things that always speaks to me. But yay, ice caps melting. I'm not excited about this at all. Let's see. Should we move on to another study? Another study?
Right.
Okay. How about addiction? Is it a disease of the brain? We've talked about this before on this show. This idea is not new. In fact, researchers have been publishing on this idea since before 2004. There's the idea that the brain itself might sometimes be wired in certain individuals in a particular way to make them more likely to be become addicted to substances or addicted to behaviors. This idea has been around for a while now, but a new study has been published in the journal Science that adds even more weight to this idea that addiction is not necessarily a personality problem or a failing of a human to become an addict. It is a disorder of the brain, and it's really something in the way the brain is wired that predisposes a person to become addicted or not. Anyway, researchers was funded by Medical Research Council, and researchers looked at the brains of 50 cocaine or crack addicts and compared them to the brains of their siblings who had never become addicts. And they didn't just slice up the brains. They were looking at the activation in particular areas to see how different areas of the brain were responded to particular stimuli. What they found is that addicts and non-addicts had the same abnormalities. And it's an area of the brain called the frontostriatal system. It's an area that controls behavior and is this hard-wiring area for addiction. So the siblings, one became an addict, one did not. They both shared the same abnormalities in this area controlling behavior. So now the question is, what is it about the life or the activities of the siblings that did not become addicted that actually that was different? So what is it that kept them from becoming addicted when their sibling became an addict? But this is a pretty telling study that addiction, says Dr. Paul Keedwell, who's a psychiatrist at Cardiff University. Addiction, like most psychiatric disorders, is the product of nature and nurture. We need to follow up people over time to quantify the relative risk of nature versus the nurture. So how much of the lifestyle differences actually made a difference in what ended up happening to them?
And how much of it, too, is just probability? It was one of the things that the pro-smoking crowd used to trot out, which is there was these twins who both smoked a pack a day. One died of cancer and one didn't. So therefore, it can't be the cigarettes. It must be something else that they're about to. It's a Russian roulette thing. If you had to flip the coin, you had a 50% chance, which would be extremely high, right? 50% chance of getting cancer from this thing. Yeah. And you got heads and your twin got tails. That's all. That's all I would think, right? So just for that reason, it's twin studies aren't. When there's probability involved, they're not the end all. You should be able to see trends. So.
Yeah, this isn't a twin study. This is just a sibling study.
Okay.
But yeah, the researcher, some researchers, Les Iverson from the Department of Pharmacology at the University of Oxford, says these new findings reinforce the view that the propensity to addiction is dependent on inherited differences in brain circuitry and offer the possibility of new ways of treating high-risk individuals to develop better self-control. And so in this particular situation, whereas with the cigarette smoking case, it might be some environmental factor, and it is a probability issue. So what did one sibling do, one twin do that the other didn't, that would keep certain.
And the thing is, too, they could have done identical things. You can work right next to somebody who's also working with asbestos. Yeah. And, it's not a guaranteed that you have, even with your genetic codes identical, it's not guaranteed that you will experience the same result as somebody else, because it's cascades of mechanisms. It could be what your diet was that day. It could be anything like that could have buffered or not buffered or allowed something in. So it's just not that linear a progression. But still, I totally agree that the environment, if your parents were drug addicts, your genes be damned. You probably have a good chance of experiencing life from that perspective in some way. Yeah. Just in the people that the activities that you've seen, that sort of thing. Yeah. It's going to, yeah. And if there is a genetic proclivity there as well, it's going to be even tougher. Right?
All right. I think it's about time for Blair's Animal Corner.
Woohoo!
Hey. It's time for Blair to tell us a little bit about the animals she's bringing this week.
Yeah, so this week, I'm talking about zebras and their stripes. So they've now found some new things that make us think that perhaps zebra stripes help stave off blood-sucking insects. So for the past 6-7 years, I've been telling children that Zebra's stripes help them with camouflage. Not only is it cryptic coloration, so it disrupts body shape, but it also helps them to blend in with each other. So, for instance, a lion can't see where one zebra starts and another zebra ends. But some scientists actually took fake zebras and they put them in a horsefly-infested field. And they had dark-colored zebras, white zebra models, white zebra models, and then all sorts of varying stripes. And they basically found that fewer flies were attracted to the lighter horse versus the darker one. And so they assumed that a striped zebra would attract an intermediate amount of flies because there's dark and light there. But they found the least number of flies on the striped zebra.
Wow.
They also found less flies as the stripes got narrower. Which also makes me think, because there's 3 extant species of zebras. The Grevy zebra has this super thin stripe pattern, but the mountain zebra and the plain zebras have wider stripes. I wonder if there's more horseflies there, right? Where the Grevy zebras are from. Interesting. But I have trouble with this just because...
Well, I just wonder how influential the horseflies are on the survival of the zebras.
I'm wondering, are more zebras dying from horseflies getting infected or from lions?
Right.
Thinking maybe the lions are more of a pressure on their population.
Yeah, well, in terms of...
Yeah, but then again, if you're a zebra who's been pestered by tons of horseflies, you're probably at some point willing to be taken by the lion. You might not have as much will power to run away as one that's lived a pest-free life.
Yeah. It could also reflect on sexual selection. So in birds, very often the coloration is of the bird. The male bird is usually the brighter or more spectacularly decorated of the sexes. And so if a male bird is compromised by infections of any kind, then their coloration is usually drabber. The badges they have are smaller. People are probably very familiar with the house sparrow. The male house sparrow has a dark black chin badge. It's like under its throat and onto its chest. And it's this badge that is directly related to how healthy the sparrow is. And so the darker, the bigger the badge, the healthier the male. And so females will select their mates based on this badge that tells them, how healthy they are and how good a parent they're going to be, how fit a father they might be. And so I wonder if there's some aspect of the striping with fly biting that maybe the bites somehow led to infection that just compromised health enough so that females ended up choosing the more narrowly striped zebras. So that's like the one angle that I could potentially see it working. But
I could even see that maybe they were developing stripes to help with camouflage, and then they got more narrow and more defined from fly pressure kind of after the fact. I just don't see stripes coming out of nowhere just for the flies.
Just for the flies, yeah.
One interesting thing, too, about this article was
stripes for flies. I'm always going to wear stripes in the field now.
Was that they found that the zebra embryos started out black, and they got the white stripes right towards the end of development, which is interesting because I have been asked for years, are zebras black with white stripes or white with black stripes? And I always thought that was a silly question because their skin is striped. But now I know the answer. They're black with white stripes.
Ah, cool.
That's fascinating. So there's something that happens in the end of development to influence the white striping.
Right. It's interesting because like Dalmatians are born all white and they get their spots after they're born when they're growing up.
Really?
Yeah. But this is in the womb that happens. So
I just knew that Dalmatians are very often blind. No, not blind, deaf.
Oh.
They're very often deaf, which is why they make good firehouse dogs.
It's from the sirens.
I don't know. That's the zebra stuff. That's fascinating. Zebras. Something to ponder and a reason to wear stripes.
That's right.
All right, everybody. I think it's about time that we take a break. We are halfway through the show and we'll be back in just a few moments with more This Week in Science. Stay tuned.
Can't explain the things you heard with more than intuition. The line of reason shows the way to go. No conclusion. The methods of hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see.
This hour of This Week in Science is brought to you by Audible.com. We'd like to thank them for sponsoring us. Audible.com is the leading provider of audiobooks with over 75,000 different titles in a wide variety of genres. And we are sure that you will find a book to your liking within their audio library. And you can download it and take it with you. You have an portable player, iPhone, an iPod, iPad, lots of ways to listen as you go. Twis has found all sorts of science-based books in the Audible library, and we hope that you would like to start a free trial with Audible today. That's right, you can get a free trial, download an audiobook for free. All you have to do is sign up at audiblepodcast.com/twis. That's right. Go to audiblepodcast.com/twis and sign up and get a free audiobook download today. Also, in other bookie type news, Twis Book Club book of the month this month is Carl Zimmer's Planet of Viruses. Bum, bum, bum. That's right. We live in a planet of viruses. And don't you want to know all about them? Millions of viruses in a drop of seawater. It's just mind-boggling. And so Carl, a wonderful writer who's written for years for the New York Times, has a blog called The Loom. He also has written a book, an article. It's on the cover story for Time magazine this month. But anyway, he's worked it all out for us, telling us what we know about this planet that is full of viruses. So read with us the Twis Book Club Planet of Viruses this month. I hope that you would join us in reading. And finally, I want to tell everybody, not finally, I have a couple more things too. Twis 2010 Science Music Compilation CDs are available on our website. So if you go to twis.org, you can buy yourself a copy of the 2010, yes, long in the coming. I hope that anticipation has got your excitement peaked. The 2010 Science Compilation CD is now available, as are World Robot Domination t-shirts. So if you go to twis.org, you can get yourself a copy of the CD and a World Robot Domination t-shirt if you so desire. Additionally, Twis is supported by listeners like you, and your donations make everything we do possible. So they pay for our hosting, bandwidth, contractors we want to hire, fun things we try to do for the show. We appreciate any amount, $2 to $2,000 to $2 million. You make this show possible. We accept donations through PayPal currently and have made the process really easy by putting donation buttons on each episode page for the show on our website, twis.org. So go to the website, listen to the most recent episode, and comment on the show, and then click one of those buttons to donate. We thank you for your support. We really couldn't do it without you.
Plot. Our first assumptions were correct. Disprove the rest. It's hard. The methods and hypothesis and patience are the only things I need. Put on a pair of goggles and go looking for the things I couldn't see.
And we're back with more This Week in Science.
That's right. So much more. Well, a little less than a half hour more, actually. Justin, what else do you have? You had a whole bunch of stories you teased at the top of the hour, and
I did. Well, go ahead and do one, because I'm gonna have to track them down still. I've lost everything. I lost everything in the reboot. I don't know where everything is.
That was before the show.
And then I was doing the show, and then I was distracted by.
Got up and left during the break.
The show, and then
get your stories together.
Get your stories straight. This is the one I was. I've got the one here that I was thinking about not doing, but I'm going to go ahead and do it anyway because it's right here. There are thousands of mathematicians and other researchers right now who are joining a public pledge not to have anything to do with Elsevier. This says Amsterdam-based academic publishing giant, which is odd because I believe they're actually owned. Well, they own Lancet as well. They're part of that whole system, which I thought was Australian, like a very prominent Australian businessman owned the whole thing. He wasn't really expecting to have this kind of response, but he's been pretty amazed how many people are actually excited to be participating in this. If you remember, we covered some time ago, Elsevier was sort of caught over a period of about 5 years, introducing scientific journals, things that were made to look like scientific journal publications that were fully sponsored by, say, pharmaceutical companies without any form of disclaimer. So within these periodicals, which they then sell to universities for, tremendous amounts of money, you get the latest research in this, that, and the other field compiled in. It can be peer reviewed there, that sort of thing. And there is, information from companies that want to get the information of their research out, but it's always disclaimer that this is research by a corporation, by a pharmaceutical company or what have you. And the ones that are complete, sometimes they even do complete ones that are all information from, say, a pharmaceutical company is a great example. It's one of the Merck, I think, is the company that got kind of caught in a scandal. And those ones are free when it's just sort of promotional information about what the drug researcher is doing and what they've come up with and what they're finding and how they suggest that you use their product. Those they don't sell to the universities for $400 an issue. Those are free. Those they just send on. So they got caught in this big scandal some time ago. We covered that on the show, and I guess it's still there's still some resentment from the scientific community. It says here, the goal of the boycott is not to get Elsevier to change how it does things, but rather to change how we, the mathematics community, behave. And in that way, rid ourselves of major commercial publishers, which really in this day and age, you would think is completely feasible. We have a Public Library of Science online now. There's other avenues out there to publish work, to make it public without having to go through one of these commercial publishers. This won't happen suddenly. It may be necessary for things to go a bit quiet while we lay the groundwork and put in some hard graft. Says here. This is Timothy, and I think I mentioned it. Timothy Gowers is the gentleman saying these things. There is precedent. The most lasting legacy of previous such boycotts and protests has been the creation of new places and ways to publish rather than just deserting the existing publishers. They, do so piecemeal and sort of migrate to other places. Very interesting. I think this is that day, and just in general, print media is dead. It's dying a slow. It is.
No, it's
Newspapers are showing less and less and less people subscribing to their product than ever before. They're going away in droves. They're going away in droves to the internet. Is basically where they're going. They're going there because there's the collection of things that people used to get from print articles that were periodicals are so much slower than what they can get online now to begin with. If there's a portion of a newspaper that you used to enjoy reading, there are websites dedicated to that subject material in much greater detail than your newspaper ever delved into in the first place, and it's immediately accessible, and it's free, and it's going to be more comprehensive. So just in sort of general, those things are disappearing. What's going to be interesting, I think, in the future of this, I think this is a fantastic idea, and I hope it catches on, is things like the Public Library of Science Online isn't going to have the company-created research papers slipped in as though this was regular, research. It's going to be much harder for them to do this, because these weren't just submissions, by the way, too. What they got in trouble for wasn't just that they were submitting stories that were in entire volumes, journals that were corporately sponsored. They had an entire marketing team working for Elsevier who was facilitating you getting your articles published, and they were even offering to leverage the Lancet, right? And its name and gravitas, as well as maybe even connect you with scientists who would sign off on papers. So it was pretty wicked. So yeah, good luck with this. I want to follow this a little while later, and I want to see if we can find out if their circulation rate falls off.
Well, yeah, we'll see. I mean, if it works, if the boycott works, if scientists stop publishing in these journals, then they're not going to have quality research to publish, and that's their bread and butter. And so the respectedness of the journals will start to fall. However, the question is, are the scientists going to be capable of promoting themselves in a widespread enough way that enough scientists will stop publishing in these journals to actually make a difference? Elsevier is, I believe it's a European company. So, what happens in the United States and the government regulations here isn't necessarily going to happen in other countries. And so United States scientists might not be publishing in the Elsevier journals, but researchers from other countries will possibly continue to. And so then the question is, is it just the United States researchers that miss out?
Well, so far, it doesn't really break it down in terms of where these researchers are coming from. So far, it says 4,800 researchers from all fields have joined this. They're getting about 200 new signatures a day currently. Only 20% of those who've signed up are mathematicians, so it's not just the mathematics folks who are making this sort of switch. And part of, I guess, the complaint too is that the journals that they sell are bundled in packages, so you can't select a couple of them that you want your university, what have you, to subscribe to. You have to pick from a large mass and pay for all of them, which is part of why by selling them promotional material, why it was so sort of outrageous.
Yeah. Just from what I know, though, Elsevier does have a lot of very quality journals. A lot of people publish in them because they're great journals. There's quality research. So, hopefully we'll see how this moves forward and that everybody can figure out how to work together in this. We will see. And if
I think it just goes online.
If it doesn't get published in Elsevier, well, it goes online. It has to be peer reviewed. It's a matter of, people picking up the banner and running with it, creating new journals like PLOS that are peer reviewed, that the scientific community trust, and it's going to be a very tumultuous period in the scientific community.
Yeah, and Elsevier too is it's a publishing giant. They're not a research organization to begin with. It's a commercial publishing organization. That's what they do. They probably. The idea that that's the gatekeeper for the information that we're getting in the first place is a little irritating. It's a little disturbing.
Maybe something has to happen where they publish it in their journals and people still have to pay to get the article as formatted and printed in their journals and how they would have it on or access it through them online. Or you can get an unformatted version of the article from the researcher's website. Like maybe there's something where you have to actually go to the researcher's website to get the original article free. I don't know.
Yeah, but why even read on paper, though? Why even bother anymore? Who needs
Online website.
It's useless. Yeah.
I like paper.
It works better as a tree than it does as paper.
It sounds great coming from somebody who goes like this all the time. Mister.
Yeah, you might have a point.
Yeah. Coral reefs are really awesome. Corals are amazing animals, and a species of soft coral that was captured on footage using time-lapse photography. A scientist from the University of Queensland, Pim Bongertz, captured footage of corals as they were getting covered by sand. So there are currents, there is sedimentation, all sorts of processes that can actually be really threatening to a sedentary organism. You don't want to be covered with sand if you rely on photosynthesis, right? You have to be able to get the sunlight somehow, be able to grab organisms from around you if you're going to eat them. It's hard to do that if you're covered in sand. So mushroom corals are, I guess, the more mobile of the corals. And Dr. Bongertz, covered them in sediment and from that moment on started photographing them every 10 seconds for 20 hours. And he found that these corals inflated and deflated parts of their body to be able to get the sediment, the sand off of themselves. And so the researchers said they inflate and deflate their entire body in a series of rhythmic pulses, which allows them to effectively shed the sediment in a matter of hours. And it looks like another type of creature entirely. And so time-lapse photography in this case was a technique that opened up this view of an organism that we would normally miss. The slow rhythmic movements that are slow enough that if you were just watching the coral, you wouldn't notice it. But over 20 hours, it made a big difference. And there is actually video of this available on the BBC website, but we cannot play that here because it's BBC.
And it's 20 minutes long of just...
No, it's time lapse. It's fast.
Oh, okay.
Hush, hush. And additionally, there was a different study of corals that was published in the journal Science, a group looking at coral reefs off the western coast of Australia. They took 27 core samples from 6 different populations of corals. And these corals spanned 11 degrees of latitude. So it was the Indian Ocean, 11 degrees of latitude, which has some populations living in colder, high latitude waters and others living in warmer parts of the ocean closer to the equator. So higher latitude, southern hemisphere. Got my northern hemisphere priority going on here. So they took a look at them and then checked calcification rates on the corals in the locations. They looked at temperature, and they also compared that to ocean acidification. So calcification, temperature, ocean acidification. they found that ocean acidification, although this is the thing that has been touted as being one of the most potentially damaging things for coral populations around the world, that calcification rates had very little to do in these different locations with ocean acidification. It had a lot more to do with temperature. So the impact on the coral growth and calcification was more so through temperature than acidification. And so what they think is that we have what we're going through right now are warming of waters that are so cooler. Normally, cooler waters are becoming warmer, and so allowing these corals to grow more than they would normally. Whereas if the waters were not becoming warmer, they would be affected more by ocean acidification. So there's the two factors are interfering with each other at this point in time. But at some point, the advantages of the warming, the nice warming that is happening currently, will disappear as it continues to warm. And so we'll just see heating and dying and ocean acidification affecting acidification eventually. So anyway, even though this was kind of started off as a really positive thing, if you look into the future, it's really quite bleak. No, kidding. Kidding. No, there is hope. There is still hope.
But not for much longer.
That's right.
So if your car isn't running right, you take it to a physician, right, Kirsten? If you break out in a rash?
A mechanic for the car, a physician.
You break in a rash, then you go to a painter to have them cover it up, right?
Take my child to a doctor.
Wait, if you want advice in the garden, call the fire department. And if you want to meet that certain someone, call the poison hotline. That's probably going to work. Right?
So confused.
If you want to know what's going on with global warming, apparently the person you're supposed to call is a politician.
Ha.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's who you should need to call. So this is kind of an interesting study where they looked at the rates of, maybe it's kind of a correlative, but rates of people, opinions of people who believed that climate change was a threat, which peaked, I guess, they studied 2002 to 2010. They found that the public belief that global warming was a looming threat peaked in 2006, 2007, at a time when both Democrats and Republicans, our nation's leaders, were in agreement mostly about the issue. Public concern has since dropped as partisanship has increased on the issue. It is the political leaders in Washington who are really driving public opinion about the threat of climate change, said J. Craig Jenkins, co-author of the study and professor of sociology at Ohio State University. Politics overwhelms the science. The study found that the state of the economy was the second biggest factor affecting perceptions of climate threat. It's kind of interesting. The incidence of extreme weather events had no effect on Americans' view of the climate change threat. New research published in scientific journals had no impact on public views, but major reports on climate change and articles in popular science magazines did have a small, yet still noticeable impact. The work of advocacy groups, they think, have some impact in this. The quantity of media coverage also affected perceived threat levels, but that coverage was mostly a function of what political leaders and advocates happened to be saying about, not scientists going out there on television, not the research being addressed in comprehensive news stories, but when they would bring a political person on who would say whether or not they believed in what apparently they've been reading of what the scientists were saying. So yeah, the most important factor remained the polarized positions taken by Democrats and Republicans in Washington, Jenkins said, which kind of makes sense in a horrible sort of way. People have ideological loyalty to political parties. They tend to have opinions on issues that they would themselves perhaps have never encountered or likely would never encounter in their life based on a political party's overall umbrella of stances on things, which I've always found really, really interesting. How somebody can be for or against an issue that has nothing to there's no way that they're going to be interacting with that issue in any way, shape, or form. The message that climate scientists need to rethink their strategy. Many scientists believe if we simply educate people about climate change, they will eventually see it as a threat and determine that we need to do something about this, which may not be true. I think we talked about this a little bit last time, too. Fear isn't working. The fear that there's a threat out there doesn't seem to be sticking. Just educating people doesn't seem to be sticking. I think my earlier idea is still probably the best solution to garner public opinion. And I think it's time we're going to have to put this out there to the scientific community to really pick up the baton and run with it. We need to change the phraseology from climate change and global warming to climate. Yeah, that's the only way. That's the only way we're going to reach the public in mass. We have to explain that the planet has climate. Yeah. And that it's a disease that causes some warming regions in the Earth parts, right? Until we do that, I really don't think we're going to be able to break through to the general public. Plus, it would be so much fun just to watch the politicians having to address the issue of climate. Yeah,
if they had to say it right
over and over again, right? They just get, I don't even want to talk about this. Scientists, talk to the scientists about it. I'm not going to be on camera saying climate, a couple hundred times in the news cycle. There's just no way. I'm out, right?
I'm not going to do it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's a pretty good sized study too. I mean, it's still correlative, in many ways, but
as always,
it was data from 74 surveys, which throughout the whole thing were administered to 84,000 respondents. So that's a good swath of opinions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think the one thing that was interesting to me is that it had nothing or very little to do with facts, and that people's opinions had very little to do with facts, and very little to do with weather and what people were experiencing, and that really it was the political whims that are the drivers, or that seem to drive.
That's the other thing too. The how many times the severe winters that are going on in Europe and Northern Europe have been pointed to as, well, it can't be warming if you can have a really bad winter there, when in fact this is one of the predictions in the models, is that if we are slowing down in any way, the conveyor belt it brings that warm air up to Europe. London is at the same latitude as Juneau. Glasgow is the same as Calgary. They're very far north. And even if the temperatures, even if the winter temperature hasn't gotten colder, the reason you would be seeing much more severe winters is because of the snowfall, of precipitation. That 4.3 trillion tons of ice didn't go into space. It's still here. It's going around. It's going to drop down in other places. So we may have, on the other hand, hey, the one silver lining, if anything, I think it's this point too. If you're going to be against doing anything about global warming, go around and agree with the science, understand that this is correct, but look for the silver linings, right? Look for something that you can say why it's a good thing. I mean, that's all they're going to be left with at some point. Well, it's redistributed 4.3 tons of fresh water, which is a scarcity in much of the world.
Trillion tons.
In the last decade, 4.3 trillion tons of fresh water that we didn't have access to before. I'm saying it's a good thing, right? Like, you could try something other than just blanket denial. Except that that's working. Except that raising doubts about science by a politician, for some reason, has a credibility with people, has a gravitas. I don't imagine why that is.
Yeah. Well,
I can, but I don't like it.
We're done with our show. It's been an hour.
That was it?
We've talked our way through it. And we didn't get to like half of the stories that you said you brought.
I know. There's some interesting stuff there too. But
you lost them.
No, I found everything. Well, what happened was
too late.
It auto-saved into wrong different files.
It auto-saved to wrong.
It was in weird places.
Yeah.
But
okay.
Yeah, solar cells. This is really I'll do it really fast. We may be in for the next round of solar cells being anywhere from 25 to 40% more efficient than the current ones. It's work at Cambridge University, their physics department over there. Basically what they did is they've managed to figure out a way to use blue photons. Much of the light the photons that actually reach solar cells, they're only using part of the spectrum. Much of the rest of it's going out as heat. They figured out a way to use basically a larger portion of that spectrum in each solar cell, makes it much more awesomer, which is important.
Yeah, to be able to get more of a greater part of the spectrum means that you get more energy.
More energy, more electricity.
More energy means that it's more efficient and better for creating energy for us. It's awesome. That's awesome. Hopefully they can do it in a way that is cheap and easily implemented. That's the sticker.
Yeah, and actually that's the rub here too. What they've done is they've used an organic compound in this, much cheaper than the silicon. They say this will also allow it to be one of the cheapest mass producible. They can do this on the roll-to-roll printing deal, and it will drastically reduce the cost of a solar panel. However, the quote here is pretty good. It's organic and hybrid solar cells have an advantage. This is Bruno Eller, who's the lead author of the study. Organic and hybrid solar cells have an advantage over current silicon-based technology because they can be produced in large quantities at low cost by roll-to-roll printing. However, much of the cost of a solar panel or solar power plant is in land, labor, and installation hardware. As a result, even the organic solar panels, even though they're less expensive, we need to improve their efficiency to make them competitive. Otherwise, it's like buying a very cheap painting only to find out that you have to put it in a very expensive frame. which
sometimes
there's other things that are in there in the cost thing. But that sounds like a great one of those things. Have one of those stimulus workforces that they used to build the Hoover Dam. We could just pave one of those states we don't really need that much, like big swaths of Arizona and Nevada with
I'm just going to keep
giant,
quiet.
massive solar.
We're done here, people.
That's it.
Thank you for watching the show. Shout outs. I'd like to give a shout out to Christopher Sisk for volunteering to help with the Twis website. And I'd also like to give a shout out to Austin for writing in with a question for his 13-year-old brother. I appreciate your letters and emails. We'll be back next week.
Yeah, thank you everybody for listening. We hope you enjoyed the show. We are also Twis available as a podcast. Just search for This Week in Science in the iTunes directory. If you have an Android device, you can search for us there. We're Twis, the number 4 droid in the Android marketplace.
And for more information on anything that you've heard on today's show notes are going to be available at our website, twis.org. Thanks to the lovely Blair.
No problem. Happy to do it.
We also want to hear from you, so email us. I'm Kirsten at thisweekinscience.com, and the guy in the other window is Justin at thisweekinscience.com.
Be sure to put Twis, TWIS, somewhere in that subject line, or your email will be spam filtered into oblivion. You can contact us also at the Twitter, at Dr. Kiki or at JacksonFly. We love your feedback. If there was a topic you would like us to cover or address, a suggestion for an interview, please let us know.
And we'll be back here next week. We hope that you'll join us once again for more great science news.
And if you've learned anything from today's show, remember,
it's all in your head.
This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. This week in science, it's the end of the world. So I'm setting up shop, got my banner unfurled. It says the scientist is in, I'm gonna sell my advice. Show them how to stop the robots with a simple device. I'll reverse global warming with a wave of my hand. And all it'll cost you is a couple of grand. 'Cause this week's science is coming your way. So everybody listen to what I say. I use the scientific method for all that it's worth. And I'll broadcast my opinion all over the earth. 'Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 I've got one disclaimer and it shouldn't be news. That what I say may not represent your views, but I've done the calculations and I've got a plan. If you listen to the science, you may just yet understand that we're not trying to threaten your philosophy. We're just trying to save the world from jeopardy. And this week in science is coming your way. So everybody listen to everything we say. And if you use our method instead of rolling a die, we may rid the world of toxoplasma gondii. 'Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 Got a laundry list of items I want to address. From stopping global hunger to dredging Loch Ness. I'm trying to promote more rational thought. And I'll try to answer any question you've got. But how can I ever see the changes I seek when I can only set up shop 1 hour a week? This week in science is coming your way. You better just listen to what we say. And if you've learned anything from the words that we've said, then please just remember it's all in your head. 'Cause it's this week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in science. This week in science. This week in science. 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 This week in 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 science.
I have awesome stamps.